and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Olivia and this is a channel where I talk about the presidents and make their favorite desserts. These are the men that shaped the world that we live in, so I think it's important that we know a little bit about them. At the very least, we should know their names. At the very most, we should know what they like to eat. And I'm gonna try to cover everything in between that. If you like what you see, make sure to subscribe down below so that you can see exactly when I post. And if you haven't seen them yet, make sure to go back and watch my videos on John Adams and George Washington so that you can be all caught up. And with all that said, let's continue the journey with everybody's favorite hypocrite, Thomas Jefferson. And for Tom, I will be making his very own vanilla ice cream recipe. To be honest with you guys, this is all the ingredients that are in this recipe. It's not as complicated as the other ones. So I don't know if it'll be as entertaining to watch me make it, but I hope it will be. A lot of people think that Thomas Jefferson was the first one to bring ice cream to America, or that he even invented it. He didn't, and he wasn't the first one to bring it. However, he did help popularize ice cream because he served it a lot in the White House. And this is his very own recipe. He's the first one whose wife's dessert is not his favorite. His is his own. Conceited, maybe. The recipe called for a stick of vanilla, like the vanilla bean. I couldn't find that in my grocery store. Maybe they were out or they just don't sell it. I couldn't find it, so I'm just gonna use vanilla extract. It should be fine. So I'm gonna start by separating all of these eggs, and I will also start talking to you about the man of honor, Thomas Jefferson. So Tom was born in Charlottesville, Virginia in 1743. George Washington was also from Virginia, as well as a lot of the other presidents. And he grew up on a plantation that his father owned. Thomas Jefferson had 6 sisters, and he also had 1 surviving brother. I think that he also had some other brothers, but sadly they did not survive into adulthood. Back then, the death rate for children was obviously a lot higher. I'm gonna need another egg. When Thomas Jefferson was 14, his dad died, and therefore he was able to inherit all of his dad's land and his slaves. Because Thomas Jefferson was the oldest son, even though he was their 3rd child, he had 2 older sisters, I think. He was the oldest son, so therefore he got the land because this was the 1700s and shit was messed up. He did go to college. Alexa, what college did Thomas Jefferson go to? Thomas Jefferson did go to the University of William and Mary. And Thomas Jefferson was a bit of a nerd. He didn't really like the fact that all the other students were partiers. He just wanted everyone to just learn. Thomas Jefferson really loved to learn. He was interested in a lot of different things. He was interested in gardening, architecture, bird watching, reading, writing. He wrote a few books. I need one more egg. Yeah, he had a lot of different interests. So he didn't love the fact that the other students weren't so invested in their education, but you know, what are you gonna do? And then there weren't any real formal law schools back then yet, so he studied law under other respected attorneys. He kind of had a private education from them, and then after he was done with that, he became a lawyer and he practiced law, just like a lot of other presidents do. Alright, I don't know. I don't know how much vanilla bean equals vanilla extract, but I'm just gonna do 2 tablespoons, maybe. My recipe is for 2 bottles of good cream. This heavy cream is good to me. It's good to me. Oh my god. 2 days of the gym being closed. I can't even open this. All right. So as I said, Thomas Jefferson was interested in architecture and also gardening. So after he inherited the land from his dad, he decided to build a big old mansion there, and he designed the blueprints and he designed the gardens around it. He also like shocked some people by eating a tomato once, because I guess they weren't super popular in America yet. I love tomatoes. Sometimes I eat tomatoes like apples and people look at me like I'm insane, so I kind of get it. Thomas Jefferson also really liked the fancy things. He really had a taste for the finer things in life.
The Finer Things Club is the most exclusive club in this office. Naturally, it's where I need to be.
He was a bit of a fancy man, if you will. How do you get this not to splash? Oh my god. So this mansion was called Monticello, and while he was at Monticello, he kept really detailed notes about everything that was going on. He kept notes on the animals and the nature and the plants, and also all of his slaves. Slavery is going to be a really big topic in this video. Thomas Jefferson is the worst slave-owning president that we've had so far on this channel. 2 tablespoons might be too much, but it's vanilla ice cream. It's gotta have vanilla in it. In 1772, Thomas Jefferson married Martha Skelton. She was a young widow, but she was also a very wealthy woman in Virginia. I want to mention that Thomas Jefferson also came from a pretty wealthy family. And Martha and Thomas would go on to have 6 children together. However, only 2 of the children would survive, and they were 2 daughters. 10 years into Martha and Thomas's marriage, Martha sadly died at the age of 33 due to complications in childbirth. And I'm assuming that at the time, this is probably something that was pretty common. So this heavy cream has to come to a boil, so I'm just gonna put it on the stove right now and just let it go. All right, so the heavy cream is on the stove now. I am not gonna show you it on the stove because I don't think that it's very interesting or entertaining, and also, trust me, you guys don't want to see the other side of my kitchen. When that's done boiling, it has to go on top of the egg yolk, so I'm just gonna transfer it into a bigger bowl. After Martha's death, Thomas Jefferson promised her on her deathbed that he would never marry again, and he actually kept his promise. He never ever did marry again. And Thomas Jefferson had to raise his 2 daughters alone. However, these are not the only 2 children that Thomas Jefferson fathered. I'm gonna talk about a woman named Sally Hemings. She was one of Thomas Jefferson's slaves, and sometimes she is referred to as Thomas Jefferson's concubine, which I honestly don't think is right. So Sally Hemings was one of the slaves that Thomas Jefferson inherited from his father-in-law, so Martha's father, and she was the daughter of Martha's father and one of his enslaved women. So this made Sally Hemings Martha Jefferson's half-sister. When Sally was 14, she was chosen to accompany Thomas Jefferson's daughter in France as a handmaid. Technically, while she was in France, she was a free woman because I guess Europe didn't have the same slavery laws that we did. But that doesn't mean that life was easy for a free black woman in the 1700s in France either. It just means that technically she was free. While she was in France, she did a lot. She learned the language, which is great. And then when it was time to return back to Virginia with Thomas Jefferson, she refused to go back with him until he negotiated some privileges that she and her children would be able to have. And Thomas Jefferson actually kept his word on the negotiations with Sally. When Sally returned to Virginia, she was 16, so she was in France for about 2 years. And when she returned, she was pregnant with one of Thomas Jefferson's children. Even though he never really confirmed this, DNA now did confirm that it was his children. And keep in mind that Sally Hemings was only 16 and Thomas Jefferson was probably well into his 40s at this point. Enslaved women had no rights to refuse any sexual advances. And historians kind of debate over the nature of their relationship, whether it was consensual or non-consensual. But in my personal opinion, considering the lack of rights and the extreme age difference in today's society, this would be pedophilia and it would be illegal. I'm gonna say that it probably was not consensual. So Sally Hemings would give birth to 6 of Thomas Jefferson's children, but only 4 of them would survive. When 2 of them turned 21, Thomas Jefferson freed those 2 slaves, again unofficially, so it wasn't like on paper, and this was part of the negotiation that she made back in France. And these 2 children were able to pass as white in society, and their relationship to Thomas Jefferson was never discovered throughout their life. However, they did kind of have to keep it a secret that Thomas Jefferson was their dad. The other 2 children he freed in his will. Keep in mind, he didn't really free any other slaves in his will or in his lifetime. While George Washington freed all of his slaves in his will, Thomas Jefferson did not do that, and the majority of his slaves were sold after his death. And after Thomas Jefferson died, his daughter actually unofficially freed Sally as well. This is the relationship that I was talking about in the John Adams video that John Adams called him out on. It is very likely that John Adams would have known about this relationship, even though Thomas Jefferson never really wanted to admit it. Sally Hemings is one of the most famous slaves, but she's also not very well known at all. But I think that it's important to note that she was a 16-year-old enslaved woman who was able to negotiate with a very powerful man, which I think is very brave and very important. Okay, here we go. Don't try this at home, people. This is probably not how you're supposed to do it. I'm gonna just stir it a little bit. I'm assuming the hot liquids probably cooked these yolks, hopefully. So Thomas Jefferson's relationship with slavery is really complicated, and it kind of is a metaphor for America's relationship with race. Throughout Thomas Jefferson's life, he owned about 600 people. There was always about 130 slaves at Monticello at a time. He used things like separating families and violence and psychological and sexual abuse as ways to like make his power known. He did write that he wanted to be better than the other slave owners, I guess more gentle and more lenient, even though he wasn't. But I want to make it clear that there is no such thing as a good slave owner. I mean, George Washington was also not a good slave owner. That doesn't exist. If you own slaves, you're not good. All right, this has to go back on the stove, so I'm just gonna put it back on now, all right? Okay, I say that Thomas Jefferson's relationship with slavery is complicated because he was highly influenced by the Enlightenment ideas. So on one hand, he very much believed in individual rights. He believed in everybody's right to liberty, but he also believed that Black people were biologically inferior to white people. He also believed that Black and white people could not live in a society peacefully together. And he also at one point said that freeing slaves would be like abandoning small children, which is disgusting. Even though he did at some points advocate for abolishing slavery and he supported a gradual ending to slavery, he owned slaves for his entire life, and he didn't even free his slaves in his will. So not my favorite guy so far. So Thomas Jefferson was not known as a very good speaker. Some people think that he had like stage fright and stuff like that. I took a public speaking class in college, so maybe that's why I'm so good at this. But Thomas Jefferson was known for being a very good writer, and John Adams said that he had a happy talent for composition and singular felicity of expression. So he was very good with the pen. And there was a committee of 5 for the Declaration of Independence, and they selected him to be the sole author of the document. And in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote these famous words: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Whenever I hear that, all I think about is the Hamilton song.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I'm gonna compel him to include women in the sequel. Right!
All men are created equal. Yeah, right. All right, I'm supposed to strain this over a towel. So we'll see how this goes. Shit. So the fact that Thomas Jefferson wrote these famous words, but then owned slaves his entire life, is basically the biggest reason why Thomas Jefferson is such a contradiction and a hypocrite. Smells really good. And I think that he kind of embodies a lot of the contradictions that live within America. We want to be great. We want to be the land of the free. We want to be better, but we also have a lot of deeply ingrained in us racism. How could we not? We used to own people, literally. He really embodies these two parts of America in one person, and I think that's why he as a person was so complicated. I really don't think I did the straining part right at all. It was very hot. All we care about on this channel is if it tastes good. So after Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence in 1776, he was elected as the governor of Virginia, and he served as that from 1779 to 1781, I think. Yes, he also helped to pass some freedom of religion laws, which helped solidify the separation of church and state, which I think is very good. And then he served as the US minister to France, taking over for Ben Franklin. And this time it is that Ben Franklin. While he was over in France, this is when he was able to strengthen his friendship with John Adams. I talk a lot about this in my last video on John Adams, and he also was able to form a friendship with Abigail Adams. They corresponded a lot, and she was actually one of the only women that Thomas Jefferson actually treated as an equal, because she was extremely intellectual. Because Thomas Jefferson was in France, he wasn't able to be at the Constitutional Convention. However, he was kept informed, and he advocated for a Bill of Rights and also for presidential term limits, even though I'm pretty sure this didn't come into effect until way later. So this is supposed to go into something called a sabatiere, which I don't own. So I'm gonna try to make my own. I don't know if it's gonna work. So when he returned from France, he was elected as the first United States Secretary of State under George Washington. And when he was the Secretary of State, he really clashed with the Secretary of Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. I talk a lot about this in the George Washington video, so make sure to go watch that if you want to know more. Basically, they disagreed on how much power the government should have, and also the revolution going on in France about whether we should support them or not. Basically, all of the cabinet members and George Washington agreed with Alexander Hamilton, and Thomas Jefferson was real sad about this. He felt super unsupported, and this drove him to resign as the Secretary of State. But he had big plans after George Washington left. I'm gonna try to fill the gap with ice. Hopefully this works. And when he was resigning, he also kind of helped form the Democratic Republicans, which is the party that really supported him and everything that he did and all of his ideas, and he did no wrong, and he was their king. And
Like, you're perfect, you're beautiful, you look like Linda Evangelista, you're a model.
Yeah. And then in 1796, he ran against John Adams for president. After George Washington left, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson went head to head. I really have a feeling this is not gonna work because this ice is too big. So Thomas Jefferson lost in the election of 1796 against John Adams, and this made him the vice president. Back then, the vice president didn't really do anything. So instead of doing anything, Thomas Jefferson really just criticized John Adams the whole time. All right, I got a hammer. I'm gonna try to crush it so that I can fit better into these cracks. So John Adams didn't really consult Thomas Jefferson on anything when he was president, and this probably pissed Thomas Jefferson off. My arm is so tired. Better be good, Tom. It's a little better. Now, I talk a lot more about the relationship between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams in my video on John Adams. For the sake of time and for the sake of repetitivity, And for the sake of not being repetitive, I'm not really gonna go into detail about that in this video. So if you want to know more about their romance, then go watch that video. It's only about half covered in ice. I don't think that'll work, but I'm gonna progress anyway. I'm supposed to pour salt on the ice. It'll help it freeze. If it doesn't freeze in an hour, I'll just put it in the freezer. Honestly, I tasted some of the liquid and guys, it tastes really good. So after Thomas Jefferson was vice president, he was kind of over it, as it was everybody who was vice president. So he ran again against John Adams. And this was one of the most brutal elections. They both bashed each other in the news, and John Adams' campaign said that Thomas Jefferson was unchristian and that chaos would take over if he won. And since John Adams really messed up his presidency, he didn't come in second, he came, I think, in third. And Thomas Jefferson tied with another person that was running for president, Aaron Burr. Might honestly put this on the back porch just to maybe give it a little bit of a better chance. Since only half of it has ice, I'm just gonna go put this on the back porch. So it was up to the House of Representatives to determine who would be the winner of the election of 1800, since Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr received the same amount of electoral votes. All right, so the ice cream is on the back porch freezing. It has to freeze for like an hour. Hopefully it freezes. I have no idea if it will. And I actually still have a lot to cover. And I also have a pomegranate that needs to be eaten. So I'm just gonna open that on camera so that you have something to watch while I'm talking. I only ever opened a pomegranate once and I don't feel like looking up how. So I think I'll figure it out. So since Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson tied in this election, it was up to the House of Representatives to decide who was the winner. A lot of the Federalists, or the people that would have voted for John Adams, wanted Aaron Burr to be president. However, then Alexander Hamilton had to chime in with his big mouth. And even though Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson disagreed on everything, which actually caused Thomas Jefferson to resign, Alexander Hamilton, in the biggest twist in history, actually endorsed Thomas Jefferson and basically said that Aaron Burr had no opinions and no morals, and we have no idea what he's thinking, and that's dangerous. So Thomas Jefferson ended up winning this election, maybe or maybe not because of Alexander Hamilton. And these remarks from Alexander Hamilton led to basically his death because it pissed off Aaron Burr so much that he killed him in a duel. It's really hard to know if this is still good, but I'm gonna eat it anyway. Now, neither Alexander Hamilton or Aaron Burr were ever president, so I'm gonna not talk about them anymore. This channel is not for them, presidents only. But if you want to know more, there's a whole play about them. It's called Hamilton. So after he won the election of 1800, Thomas Jefferson became the third president of the United States, and he was the first president to be inaugurated in Washington, D.C. George Washington was inaugurated in New York, and John Adams was inaugurated in Philly. He was also the first president to walk into his inauguration ceremony. The other two rode in a horse-drawn carriage, which is honestly something that I kind of wish they still did. So during Thomas Jefferson's first term in office, he dealt with a lot. He was able to put to end the century-long harassment from North African pirates on American ships. This is called the Barbary War. And then he did the most famous thing that he did during his presidency, which is called the Louisiana Purchase, where he was able to purchase a whole bunch of land from France and basically doubled the size of the United States. So middle America, this one's for you. And since most Americans lived within like a 50-mile radius from the Atlantic Ocean, we needed to really find out what the hell was going on in the middle of America. And he commissioned these two guys named Lewis and Clark to go and explore the new land and find out what the hell is going on out there.
We do beg your pardon, sir, but we are looking for the Northwest Passage to the Pacific Ocean.
I can take you as far as 125th Street. You got a Metro card?
We have 2 rabbit pelts and a stick of dried venison.
and this expedition lasted for 2 years. And Thomas Jefferson actually had some feelings about doing these things, like the Louisiana Purchase and the war on the pirates, because he thought that he was using too much government power. You have to use some government power, I mean, or else it would just be like the Wild West. Maybe John Adams claims that it would be chaotic if Thomas Jefferson won was like a little bit right. So Thomas Jefferson was up for re-election in the election of 1804, and he basically dominated this election. He was up against somebody named Charles Pinckney, and he got 70% of the popular vote and 162 electoral votes to Charles's 14. So he won by a lot. Oh my god, this pomegranate is so good. So he won by a lot, so he was still the president. And in his second term, he had a little bit more problems. The Napoleon War broke out between France and England. France and England just really couldn't get their shit together, I guess. They're always at war and dragging America into it. So Thomas Jefferson tried his hardest not to get involved in this war because we were still broke. But then the French and the British both started harassing our merchant ships. So Thomas Jefferson had no choice but to close the ports and to cut off all foreign trade. This really hurt the economy, and it was one of the more bad things that Thomas did during his presidency. And honestly, even though he tried, his best efforts didn't really work because we ended up going to war with Britain in the War of 1812 anyway, but this was not during his presidency, so maybe he did do a good job. I don't know. So Thomas Jefferson chose not to run for a third term, and since he was the only one after George Washington who didn't lose his re-election, he had the choice to run for a third term, but he chose not to. All right, hi guys. So unfortunately, the ice cream didn't freeze all the way, so I'm gonna improvise and have it as a milkshake instead. I don't think that this is a fail. I just really don't think that I have the time to execute it the way it's supposed to be. I didn't allot myself enough time to shoot this and have it freeze. Sometimes in life, things just don't work out the way you want them to, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world. I'll just have it as a milkshake. It's fine. If you hear something weird, it's my cat eating. I can't stop him from doing it. I'm sorry. So after Thomas Jefferson was done being president, he went back to Monticello in Virginia, and he also helped found the University of Virginia. And he actually made it so that Virginia was one of the only universities in the country that didn't have any religious affiliation, and it didn't have any religious requirements to get in either. So I kind of think that that's great. I don't know. And then Thomas Jefferson died in Monticello at the age of 83, and he died on July 4th, the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and he also died on the same day as John Adams. I talk a lot about this in John Adams' video. And Thomas Jefferson liked to write so much, and he didn't like anybody else rewriting him, that he actually wrote what's on his gravestone, and that says, "Here was buried Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of American Independence, of the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, and father of the University of Virginia." So let's go ahead and try this ice cream milkshake. I have this ladle. That's how I'm gonna try to get it out. As you can see, it's very much, it's not as pretty as the cakes and stuff, but it's ice cream. I don't know what you want. Okay, Tom. It's actually really good. It obviously would be better as ice cream when it's frozen because it would be cold, but it's really sweet. It has a lot of flavor. You know, it would be good if you made the vanilla ice cream and Abigail Adams apple pandowdy and you ate them together. That would be like a 17th century apple pie and ice cream combo. But if you make it yourself, just give yourself enough time to actually let it freeze. That's all. Do I think that Thomas Jefferson was a good president? Sure. I think that he was okay as president. I think that the Louisiana Purchase was something that America really needed. So obviously, Thomas Jefferson had a lot of moral issues. He had a lot of contradictions in his beliefs, and I think that they reflect in American society even until today. But I think that even with his faults, he kind of gets off easy in history because he is the author of the Declaration of Independence. It's kind of like one of those things where even though he's not a great guy all around, we have to respect him because he wrote this document that is so sacred to our country. Thomas Jefferson. Is he as hot as David Diggs? Absolutely not. Okay everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode on Thomas Jefferson. If you like the videos, make sure you go and like, subscribe, and share. As always, I strive for historical accuracy, but there is a lot of information out there and a lot of it is contradicting. So I'm doing my best, but if you have something to share, make sure you comment below. But as always, be nice in the comments. All of the links to my research and a podcast that I listen to called Presidential will all be linked down below. And with that, I hope you all enjoy your week, and I'll see you next Thursday for someone that we really haven't talked at all about on this channel. Who is the next president? James Madison.